JB here. Hope everyone's doing outstanding. Monday, August 19th, 2024. 32 minutes to the open. Talk really quick about the market, some names I'm looking at, and go from there. But we're coming into the week of Jackson Hole, right? There was no talk about it the previous weeks. I started doing a little bit on my rants last week, and then sure enough, that's all the headlines are about so far. Well, over the weekend, uh, expectations are so high heading into it. It just gives folks something to talk about, but the market is up. The S&P is up 7 sessions in a row. Uh, I put on the watch list this morning as well. That 555 area, and I talked about it on Friday, seemed like a rock. Seemed like we couldn't break through that. So maybe we break through that today or tomorrow. Maybe some chop, um, and then we have the Fed minutes on Wednesday. There's still some earnings. Palo Alto reports after the close today. Maybe give a little color on what happened with CrowdStrike, or at least maybe some business that they're able to take on because of that fiasco, and should be interesting. So anyway, so that's what I'm watching on the SPY. I would love to see some chop, and also the VIX, which has one of its largest reversals in history that you can think of, from 65 all the way down under 15 on Friday, is back over 15 here this morning. So maybe some of that is just some more, I guess, expected volatility into the end of the week. Fed Chair Powell's expected to do his remarks at 10 o'clock Eastern on Friday, so I'm sure. I'm not even sure if he'll have prepared remarks. Sometimes, a lot of times when he does these these speeches, he comes out with prepared remarks first. So it could come out at 8:30, and typically that's when it would come out. And then he does his speech at 10 o'clock and comments. We'll have to see how that all plays out. But I think he's been doing a very good job over the last couple of years of walking the tightrope between not being overly dovish or overly hawkish. Can set expectations for 0.75% cuts throughout the rest of the year, and I think the market will be fine. And we're surprisingly enough, considering where we were 2 weeks ago, we're stone throw away from all-time highs. So that's that. That's overall. So SPY 555. That seems like a rock. If we break through that, that'll be good support. On the flip side, maybe some chop here down to 553 or so. I wouldn't be surprised to see some chop today and tomorrow. Uh, and then the small cap. So the good thing is, I wouldn't say the good thing, but the huge reversal in the S&P, it wasn't mirrored by the small caps. Small caps on Thursday and Friday finally broke over the 50-day moving average on the IWM and showed some signs of maybe getting back to outperforming the S&P. So still plenty of room there on the small caps, which I always say it's always the silver lining. Markets could be right near all-time highs. We can have some chop, but the small caps still have some room to the upside. And then there's the VIX, all the way back under 15. But we're at 1553 here this morning. A far cry from last week. Last Monday, we were still in the 20s intraday on Monday, despite the market being pretty much flat or green. So that had me a little concerned. But now we're back to historical levels, which is a good thing. All right, individual names. I'll just go through a couple of these. And SE, all the way up to $80 on Friday. Churned that whole level into the afternoon. Just couldn't get through, and then dropped about $1.50 into the closing at 78.82. Not story doesn't change to me. I'm not going to do my rant on this one, but love this name. Once that 80 handle breaks, I think it's off to the races. 85, 90, 95. I can see it triple digits before the end of the year. And Melly got an upgrade this morning. I'm not sure if that's going to have any sympathy move with SE, but that just shows how uh, bullish analysts are on the e-commerce in some of these emerging markets in Asia and South America, so on and so forth. That's SE. Uh, Dell. So I closed the last of my Dell strikes on Friday, not because I don't think that Dell's gonna do well this week, or that it's not headed to 116, 117, and then possibly 125, because I didn't want to lose some premium into today. And it's up quite a bit from its lows a week and a half ago. So that's kind of the thought process there. They report earnings next week. I think it's August 29th. So I might look for some calls to play for premium build into the earnings report. I put it on the watch list. If they report any decent quarter and able to dispel some of the concerns around their margins on servers, I think it trades well above 130, 135 or so. So that's kind of the thought process there. So great week for Dell. Fortunately, I'm sitting there on the 100 strikes. I could have sold those for 2,700% instead of 200 and 300%. But got to have a plan. It could have went the other way just as easily. Nothing's guaranteed, so always got always got to be locking in profits, right? Just like you always got to be hedging when the markets start breaking support. I think it's important to take profits on the way up. So that's what I did. I didn't get as I didn't milk as much profits as I possibly could have, but still a great week for Dell, and I think it will continue to pay to be in calls. But I'll wait here in the morning. It's down a little bit here in the pre-market, but maybe it turns around if it starts to find some support at 111, maybe 111.50 or so. Maybe I'll look to get I'll look to get those calls to encompass earnings. That's Dell. Baidu reports Thursday morning. I was talking about on the rant Friday afternoon that it was going to close right near 89, which was my spec lotto call strike. And sure enough, was it closed at 88.96. So I can tell stories of days where something has spiked. Back when LinkedIn used to be a publicly traded company, I had calls. I think it was like the 105 calls, and it closed at like 105.11 in the last second of the trading session, and my strikes closed in the money. And it's a little different when you have uh, you know one call, right? That's not too much. But when you have 10 or 20 or 30 calls, you start doing the math on the shares. I mean, you're talking hundreds or millions of dollars of shares that you have that are possibly exercised, right? But I mean, everybody has their own broker. Most times you tell them not to make sure they don't get exercised. But uh, interesting stuff. But here's Baidu back over 89 here in the pre-market. Take a look at the 50-day moving average, 89.82. Once that breaks through, I think it's into the 90s. The hope here in my September 105s are solidly in the green. If those can get near double, I'll look to close some of those out just to cover costs and ride the rest. You know my thoughts here on Baidu. I think the AI side of their business is way underappreciated. Their bread and butter ad service is still doing well, and that helps subsidize their scale into robo taxis and everything else that's going on, partnership with Tesla. Uh, you can go on and on. Still like this one for upside. And Asian markets did well overnight. Just the Nikkei sold off almost 2%. So hopefully that's not a trend in the coming days. All right, so that's Baidu. Clear Secure. Not much to add on this one. It finally ended I think it's an 8-session winning streak, barely closing in the red. Still think this heads over $30. Added some square strikes or block. Excuse me. I always say the wrong thing. It I posted a chart, and let's see if I can get it in the chat room. But every time it breaks over this 50-day moving average, it's good for another $5 to $10 to the upside. It did it back at the end of February. It did it back at the start of April. It did it back when I had the strikes in July. And it's doing it right now, and I think it's going to head over $70. So 200-day moving average 68.29. I think once that breaks off to the races, $70 I think is the first target here on Square, and I think that'll happen pretty quickly. I keep talking about watching PayPal for some strikes. It looks like it's going to break its May highs here and then into 70s. Still watching that one for some possible spec calls, maybe some weekly strikes this week. Turn. I was putting in the chat room on Friday. The spreads are pretty insane on Turn in regards to trying to get a decent fill on some of the strikes. They have their oral 1 GLP-1 data due out in September. Who knows if it's going to encompass the September expiration, which is September 20th, or it's the data is going to come out after expiration. If it's before expiration, the September calls might be a nice spec trade because the premiums are not as high as the October strikes, so you don't get the full premium of data coming out, which could offer more upside, especially if it's positive data. So don't be surprised if you see me add a couple September strikes and then some October strikes to play. I think if there's positive GLP-1 data, it's going to trade in the mid-teens, if not higher. So 15, 16, 17, I think would be decent targets there. I think that's it. AMD, I don't know if I was talking about my rant or my chart. I always talk about AMD as a kind of like the forgotten stepchild for AI and in the chip space. And it's one of those names I'm always looking for to play for upside. And then, sure enough, what they do this morning, they announce another acquisition in the AI space. The stock was gapping all the way up at 154. It's down here at 148. It almost feels like there's a huge tug of war going on with folks who think that NVIDIA's is going to continue to squash AMD, and AMD at some point is going to be irrelevant. Which I wouldn't say they are now, but they're kind of like the low cost solution in regards to AI. Or there's the flip side of the story and narrative would be that AMD eventually is going to be able to start to get their hands in some of the market share, and the stock is way underappreciated. So I'm kind of in the latter boat, right? I think there's some opportunity for some upside. So don't be surprised if, especially if it finds footing here this morning, maybe it goes green to red at the open and then reverses. If it does that, I might look for some spec calls to play for a move to 155, 160. And I think that's it, folks. Let's have a great week. I'll be back on audio later. Rock and roll.